My name is Shannon Crosby, and I'm a registered dietitian with CoxHealth Wellness, and today I'm going to talk to you about eating healthy while eating out. So we're going to talk about the eating out habits of Americans today. I'm going to talk about the components of a healthy diet, describe recommendations for making better choices while eating out, and then finally we'll explore some popular restaurants and their healthier options. Today, people are eating out more than ever. 48% of the American food dollar is spent at restaurants, and that's about $632 billion. This equals $1.7 billion spent on restaurant foods and beverages each day. And today, the eating out scene isn't what it used to be. It's no longer an occasional treat. It's become mainstream. At least 25% of Americans eat some kind of fast food every day. Fast food restaurants are a competitive business, and restaurants stand out by offering what people want. And that usually means that the food is what we call hyper-palatable, really delicious food that makes our taste buds happy, but that doesn't always equal being the healthiest option. There are a lot of reasons why people might be eating out more today instead of preparing meals at home. Eating out is incredibly convenient. Someone else is cooking and cleaning up for you. Someone else has done the grocery shopping. It's also convenient because there are an abundance of restaurants in town. There is probably a restaurant pretty near your home or your neighborhood, and there's probably one near your workplace, not to mention the drive home between work and your house. And this convenience goes a long way. You can pick it up and eat it in your car. About 20% of all American meals are eaten in the car, and most of these are fast food meals. Restaurant meals taste great. It tastes way better than most things that we can make at home. It looks better than the food that we make at home. The taste is coming from a great deal of sugar, a great deal of salt, and a great deal of fat that creates this hyper-palatable food. It's very, very difficult to say no to. We eat out due to the marketing that we encounter trying to persuade us to eat out. To make matters worse, while we're driving around, we're bombarded with billboards that display mountainous Big Macs and glowing golden fries, and it's very hard to resist those larger-than-life temptations. It's amazing how strong the power of suggestion is. Finally, we eat out because it's relatively cheap. Of course, it's more expensive than eating at home per serving, but still, for our higher income level in the United States, fast food especially is relatively cheap. We complain about grocery prices rising, but we don't take into account the amount of money that we spend on our disposable income on fast food and restaurant food each year. If you feel that your grocery budget is pinched and restricting you on the types of foods you can choose, think about how much money you spend on restaurant food and eating out, and save that money and use it toward your grocery budget to buy higher quality foods. Since 1970, the amount of fast food restaurant business has doubled, which equates to about 300,000 establishments in the United States. And at the same time, we have seen obesity rates increase. 34% of the population is affected by obesity, and about 19% of children and adolescents are also affected. Unfortunately, people may not recognize the consequences of eating restaurant food frequently. They're unaware of how the excess fat, the excess sugar, and excess salt can lead to obesity, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes. They don't realize necessarily that the portions are very, very large, because over time we've come accustomed to those large portions. You know, the amount of food that you get at a typical restaurant is several times what's considered a healthy or normal serving size. Endless bread, buffets, and massive dinner plates tend to please the average customer. We feel like we're getting more of a value for our money by having those large portions. When you think about serving sizes for French fries at restaurants or drinks, over the last 20 to 30 years, they have significantly increased to where we kind of have this portion distortion where we don't really realize the large sizes of those. And if we end up getting a smaller portion, we feel like we're not getting that value. At fast food restaurants especially, a kid's meal portion is more of a typical adult serving size, and that's what we're giving our kids, while the adults are eating several times that size portion. Here's a picture of two different portions of pasta. The one on the right is considered an average pasta serving, while the one on the left is what you would see from a typical Italian restaurant. And it's 4 times the size of the average portion. This slide from Slate.com shows the changes in soda fountain drink sizes over the years. We can see in 1955 a McDonald's large soda was 7 ounces, where today a large soda is 32 ounces. 32 ounces of soda has about 373 calories versus 80 in the 7-ounce soda. So it's several times that size, and that's that portion distortion that I was mentioning. The Western dietary pattern, which includes frequent eating out and restaurant foods, is very, very sad. It basically equals that we're eating more food than we require. Our food is very, very energy dense, and it gets us more energy than our bodies need to function, while being very high in sugar, refined grains, and salt, which really is the perfect recipe for inflammatory processes within the body that are the root cause of many of our chronic diseases. At the same time, we're not getting enough vitamin, we're not getting enough minerals, and we're not getting enough fiber. And so we have to think about righting the ship. We have to think about decreasing those harmful ingredients while increasing vitamins, minerals, and fiber, foods that are high in phytochemicals, to help decrease inflammation, to help us better manage our weight. And eating out frequently is not conducive to this type of healthier dietary pattern. Many of the foods that we consume in restaurants is very, very limited in the amount of nutrition that it provides. It's very poor quality, highly processed food. Highly processed food typically has less vitamin, mineral, fiber content and has a lot of excess calories. In fact, in America, we consume about 31% more packaged food than restaurant food, and many chain restaurants, fast food restaurants, utilize highly processed food in order to save money on employee costs. Another challenge at eating out at restaurants is, in addition to the large portions, lots of fat, lots of sodium, we see a less of a protein content. In this comparison, we have a McDonald's kids meal versus a homemade dinner. And so we can look in the kids meal, we've got a cheeseburger, a bag of fries, apples, 3 ketchup packets, and we've even put a diet soda on there, thinking an adult's choosing that. And even with the diet soda, it gets us to nearly 500 calories in the kids meal. In our homemade dinner, we have 3 ounces of chicken, a baked potato, sour cream, broccoli, some carrots, and then for dessert, a cup of berries with some Cool Whip and sugar-free iced tea. And that gets us the same amount of calories. So one of the things that I notice is just that the volume of food in our homemade dinner for the same amount of energy is much greater. So we're getting fresher foods, whole foods that have improved nutrition, while we're also getting to eat more food. While the restaurant food is very highly processed and packaged, and the volume is much smaller. What that means is that we would eat that Happy Meal and not feel as full or satiated as we would from eating the homemade dinner. So that's going to cause us to want to eat more in a decreased amount of time afterward. When we're thinking about improving the nutritional quality of food that we get at a restaurant, we can keep in mind the CoxHealth Healthy Plate. This was developed by our dietitians to teach people how to eat, the types of foods to eat, and the amounts. You notice that half of the plate is coming from non-starchy vegetables, and the other half of the plate is divided between starches, which might be whole grains, or starchy vegetables like potatoes, peas, corn, and beans. And then we've got the other fourth of the plate, a protein source, which might include meats, fish, eggs, and cheese. The other half of that plate, those non-starchy vegetables, are going to be all the other vegetables that I didn't mention. Broccoli, cauliflower, greens, carrots, tomatoes, cucumbers, etc. And that's really the basis of our diet. When we think about a restaurant portion, whether it's a fast food or a sit-down restaurant, we're going to have a fairly sizable protein portion, whether that's meat or a hamburger patty, but the majority of the plate is going to be made up of those carbohydrates or starches, and they're very highly refined. So if we've got a sandwich, then we're going to have the bread or the bun. We might have a soda or a drink with sugar in it that's going to make up that carbohydrate source. We're probably going to have French fries or some kind of starchy side. And so you end up with a plate that's closer to 3/4 coming from the carbohydrates and not the most nutritious types. Very, very little vegetable, if any at all, and then the rest made up of the meat or protein. And so it results in a very skewed plate. So when we're thinking about eating out more healthfully, keep that healthy plate in mind and look for ways to reduce the amount of starches that you're eating on your plate, increasing the amount of vegetables, and then avoiding highly processed foods as much as possible. Next, we're going to talk about some tips for eating out healthfully. It's kind of funny, but my number one tip for eating out healthfully is to eat out less often. And so if you can restrict your eating out to no more than 1 or 2 times a week, it's going to be much easier for you to include restaurant foods within a healthy, balanced diet. I'm not unrealistic. We're going to eat out a little bit within our society, but set a limit. If you eat out every day, start to think about maybe eating out every other day and work on that and bring food from home for your lunches or breakfast that you eat in the car. Once that becomes a habit, then try to minimize that even more. 1 to 2 times a week is what's recommended. If you are trying to lose weight, 1 time a week is probably your best bet, just because when we eat out, we tend to eat excess calories, which can really derail your efforts to try to lose weight. Aside from nutrition, there's also the cost issue as well, and so we want to make sure that we're saving those food dollars to buy healthful, nutritious foods that we can prepare at home. The next tip is to plan ahead. When you're eating out, plan ahead. Understand what you're choosing before you go. It's a lot easier to decide how to eat healthfully before you get to the restaurant than it is to decide when you're sitting at the restaurant with all the delicious smells and the appearance of the other foods that the people are eating and that the wait staff is bringing out for people to eat. And with the internet and smartphones, it's easier than ever to know what restaurant menu availability is. We can get that information really 24 hours a day. So when you're going to go eat out, look up that restaurant's menu. Look for entrees that are going to be 500 calories or less. That's going to be the right amount of energy to include in a healthy meal pattern. Also, look and see what types of vegetable side dishes they offer so that you can order extra of those. There's an app called Healthy Out that's available for free on iTunes or Google Play, and this is an app that can help you find healthy restaurant dishes close to your location. You put in the location that you're at, you enter the type of diet or any nutrition guidelines that you're trying to meet. For example, if you're eating a low-calorie diet or you're eating a paleo diet or low-carb or whatever, you can put that in there. And then the app will locate restaurants nearby that offer entrees, that offer selections that are going to meet those dietary needs. You can select the restaurant and select the portions or select the food and actually see what the nutritional profile is of those. It's easy to find healthy options with this app. It makes it very, very simple and very quick to do right at your fingertips. In March of 2010, President Obama signed into law the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, or more popularly called Obamacare, and that law had quite a lot of provisions, but included a small provision that focused on menu labeling in restaurants. And so the law says that restaurants that have 20 or more locations nationwide have to disclose nutrition information on their standard menu items on the menu or on their menu board. And so now restaurants have to display the calorie values for standard menu items on their menus. We see this at restaurants in our city. We can see that at Panera Bread. We see it at fast food restaurants in the menus, in the drive-thrus. We see it at sit-down restaurants for places that have more than 20 locations. And the idea behind this is that it's going to make it easier for people who are eating at restaurants to see how much energy they're getting from their food. Does the choice that they made have 1,000 calories, or does it have 400 calories? Although the law was passed in 2010, the deadline for taking effect isn't until May of this year. And so some restaurants are still working on meeting those requirements 7 years after the law was passed. But many are already in compliance at this time. And so use that information to help you make better choices when you're eating out. My next tip is include some ideas for making those healthy choices. Some of these I've mentioned already. We basically want to think about that healthy plate and try to match our restaurant plate with the components of the healthy plate. Include a salad with lots of vegetables. With dressings, look for more of a simple oil and vinegar based dressing versus dressings that have a lot of sugar in them. Like a vinaigrette would be a better choice. Choose the fish and shrimp for your protein, which are going to be lower calorie, healthier types of fats. Of course, frying would negate that healthfulness, so we're going to choose things that aren't fried. We're going to look at grilled meats. We're going to watch those starch portions and try to limit to small portions rather than multiple portions of different types of starches. We're going to include vegetables for side dishes and calorie-free drinks, which might include water or unsweetened iced tea. Here's a comparison of some meal options at Outback Steakhouse. And so at Outback Steakhouse, on our menu, we've got a regular sized cheese fries that we're going to share with our friends. We're going to get the ribeye steak with a baked potato and steamed vegetables, but we aren't going to be able to eat all of it, so we're eating about 3/4 of it. We're getting the dessert, but that's being split with other people as well. Even with splitting the appetizer and the dessert and not eating the entire entree portion, we're getting 2,388 calories from that meal. It adds up so fast, even when you split with friends. So on the next slide, I've got a better choice at Outback Steakhouse, where we're getting a healthier appetizer of grilled shrimp that we're splitting. We're getting the Atlantic salmon with vegetable side dishes and a baked potato, still with sour cream and chives, and then we're skipping dessert and having dessert at home. And the total calorie content of this meal is going to be about 542 calories. So you can still eat at your favorite restaurants, but if you're more conscious about the choices that you make, you can significantly reduce the amount of calories and also the amount of harmful nutrients like salt and sugar that you get. On this slide, I have what I like to call the worst breakfast sandwich in the world, and that is the Hardee's Monster Biscuit, which not only has almost 800 calories, but look at the sodium content, 2,190 milligrams of sodium, which is 91% of what the average American requires in a day of salt, or the limit of salt. And so just this one sandwich is going to get you nearly all the salt that you need for, to be a healthy person in one day. A better choice for breakfast might be the McDonald's Egg McMuffin. Not the healthiest food, but calorie-wise, it's a fraction, 300 calories, still high in salt, 750 milligrams, but that's 30% of the daily value versus the 90%. And so if you're going to be eating breakfast in the car on occasion, you're 1 to 2 times a week, then something like this might be a better choice, especially if you can pair it with some fresh fruit. Watch out for a condition that has been coined health washing. For example, McDonald's has an egg white delight, and that egg white delight, with their marketing and their advertisements, sounds like a healthier option. But if you look at the nutritionals, it's not a whole lot different than just the standard Egg McMuffin. It's about 50 calories less, has a little bit less fat, it's got really more sodium than the Egg McMuffin. And so health washing is when restaurants or food manufacturers try to paint their food product in a healthier light, even if it's not that much healthier or not that much different. And so a good product, a good campaign is going to have full disclosure on the ingredients that they're on their food and any type of health benefit from that food. And so usually the bigger the claim of health on that food, the more health washed it is. So you have to be really careful with that and read those ingredient labels and look at the nutrition information to know for yourself instead of relying on the marketing. Some other examples for fast food breakfasts, again, these aren't the healthiest options, but many times a breakfast burrito is going to be a more reasonable calorie level. Fruit and yogurt can be a decent choice. They typically have quite a bit of sugar added to the yogurt, so it's not, again, the most perfect healthy food, but when you're eating out for breakfast, some of these can be better choices. With burgers, here's one of the worst. The Hardee's Monster Thick Burger comes in at 1,320 calories, 55 grams of fat, 37 grams of carb, and 2,650 milligrams of sodium, 110% of the daily value. More salt than you need in an entire day from this one sandwich. So if a burger is what you are craving, a better choice would be a junior burger, or a child size really comes in at about 300 calories. If there are vegetables on the burger like tomatoes and lettuce, ask for extra. They'll give you extra, and that can help with that vegetable content. It's not going to meet all of your vegetable needs, but it's going to help. This also has significantly less sodium, about 19% of the daily value. So it's basically just a smaller portion of the same thing. You can still have your burger, but focus on that smaller portion. This site has some alternative options at gas stations. We don't really think about gas stations as a fast food restaurant, but over the years they've kind of become that. There are lots of eating options, not just packaged foods, but fresh foods or foods that they've reheated and served at gas stations. And so keep these in mind as better choices. Things like trail mix, dried fruit, string cheese are all available at most gas stations and are going to be better choices than the reheated, ready-to-eat food or the candy or the chips and so on. Sandwich shops are often considered a healthier option for meals, but you can get into trouble with these too, namely with portions. The portion of bread that you get in a 6-inch sub or larger is several times the portion that is considered typical. A 6-inch sub is really going to be 4 portions of a starchy food that's going to make our healthy plate look quite a bit skewed. So ask for a smaller sandwich. Most sub shops will give you a 3 or a 4-inch sub and ask for extra vegetables to beef up that portion of the plate. And then also too, look for fresh fruit for side dishes. Sometimes you can get apples or other types of fruits for your side. Fresh fruits like oranges and bananas as well. Think about that drink too and avoid those sugary drinks, the sodas and the sweetened tea and so on. As far as casual restaurants, some of the more well-known chains that have healthy options include Ruby Tuesdays. Ruby Tuesday has lots of vegetable side dishes, and those are listed here on this slide along with the calorie counts. So you can make better choices and get that 50% of your meal coming from those vegetables. Lots of non-starchy sides. And Applebee's also has a nice low-calorie menu because it's smaller portions. Their rice and their carb portions are a little bit smaller, and you get a reasonable portion of the protein. Most restaurants will have healthy choices, but the problem is, and the reason why I recommend limiting going to restaurants is because it's really difficult to order healthy food at a restaurant whenever there are so many delicious, hyper-palatable, unhealthy options available, and many times we kind of succumb to that temptation. Tip number 4 is to eat smaller portions. So if cheese fries are something that you have to have, order your favorite food, but just eat a smaller portion. And that kind of goes in with our last tip of eating mindfully. Think about how you feel while you're eating. We want to be eating for nutrition, we want to be eating for nourishment, and that includes eating when we're hungry and stopping when we're full. So instead of running into that idea that you have to get more for your value, clean your plate, finish this hyper palatable, very rich, high calorie food, Think about instead stopping when you're 80% full or so. And that might mean leaving some food on your plate, which you can then take with you or just leave behind. You can consider splitting a portion with somebody else if you want to, but don't feel like you have to finish all of the food on your plate at a restaurant because, like I said, it's typically 4 to 5 times the amount of food that we would expect one to eat in a sitting. Thank you for your attention today.